It was supposed to be a regular morning segment, just another lighthearted appearance from one of Hollywood's most recognizable funny men, the kind of slot where jokes are tossed around, a few film clips are shown, and the host and guest part ways with smiles and applause. But that day, things didn't go according to the usual script. What began as a standard promotional interview soon spiraled into something far more volatile, a live on-air clash that would ripple through social media like a shockwave. Viewers didn't just witness an awkward moment, they saw a full-blown confrontation that would be talked about for months. The internet didn't stand a chance. Clips were reposted within minutes. Reactions flooded in, and just like that, a feel-good morning show became the centerpiece of one of the most uncomfortable television moments in recent history. Adam Sandler, known for his easygoing charm and signature laid-back delivery, arrived at the studio in good spirits. Before we dive in, tell us where you're watching from, also subscribe. He had that familiar, slightly slouched posture, a disarming grin, and a vibe that said, let's keep this casual. He wasn't there to stir controversy. He was promoting a new dramatic film that had already begun earning buzz from critics. Something different, something deeper. For years, he'd been inching away from the slapstick comedies that made him a household name, testing the waters of more serious storytelling. This role in particular was personal to him. He was proud of it. He expected respect. What he didn't expect was Joy Behar. From the moment he sat across from her, the tension in the air felt off. Maybe it was the tightness in Joy's smile, or the way she leaned forward just a little too eagerly, as if waiting to strike. Whatever it was, it didn't take long for things to tip into hostile territory. The first question came in fast and hit harder than anyone anticipated. Joy, eyes narrowed and voice tinged with disdain, asked with brutal directness, "So Adam, this sudden move to serious acting, is that your way of admitting the comedy wells run dry?" The studio audience froze. It was the kind of question designed to cut, not to inform. You could feel the air shift. What had been light turned heavy in an instant. Even the other hosts glanced nervously at one another, unsure of how far this was going to go. Sandler paused, his expression flickering for a fraction of a second. His trademark smile faltered, but only briefly. He recovered smoothly, giving a calm and diplomatic reply. He explained that this shift wasn't sudden at all, that he'd explored drama for years, and that he saw it as an extension of his craft, not a rejection of his past. But Joy wasn't finished. She interrupted, her tone sharpening with each word. "Come on, Adam, let's not pretend. Your last few comedies were disasters. Critics panned them. They tanked at the box office. Isn't this whole serious actor thing just a desperate attempt to stay relevant?" The jab landed hard. You could practically hear the gasp ripple through the crowd. One of the co-hosts looked like she wanted to step in, maybe steer things back on track. But Joy kept going, determined to confront Sandler head on. To his credit, Sandler remained composed. He didn't raise his voice, he didn't roll his eyes or shoot back with sarcasm. Instead, he responded with a quiet strength, reminding Joy that critics aren't the only barometer of success. "My movies resonate with people," he said, his voice steady. "I've always made films for fans. Not every film is for every person, but if I've made someone laugh or feel something, that matters." That should have been the end of it. A respectful defense, a line drawn in the sand. But Joy wasn't ready to move on. Her voice rose slightly, cutting through the studio like a blade. "Resonate? You mean with 13-year-old boys who think burps and pratfalls are peak humor? Be honest. When was the last time you made something thoughtful, something grown-ups could actually connect with?" The mood in the studio shifted again, this time darker. Laughter died out completely. No one was smiling anymore. What started as a slightly edgy exchange had now devolved into something more confrontational, more personal. The usual rules of daytime TV decorum had been tossed aside. Adam Sandler leaned forward slightly, no longer trying to diffuse the tension with charm. His eyes narrowed, his voice took on a cooler edge. "I came here to talk about a film that means a lot to me, a story about grief and healing, but instead, you're trying to turn this into some kind of roast. That's not why I'm here." You could tell he meant every word. He wasn't playing the game anymore. And for the first time, there was a flicker of hesitation on Joy's face, but she pressed on, relentless. "We can talk about grief and healing," she said. "But let's be honest, your idea of serious is still just watered down comedy with fewer punchlines. You're not exactly Daniel Day-Lewis." That was the moment it turned. No longer a combative interview. It had become a confrontation about identity, legacy, and worth. Sandler didn't explode. He didn't storm off, but his reply hit like a brick wall. Joy, I've been in this business over 30 years. I've made people laugh, cry, and everything in between. I've worked with incredible filmmakers. I've built something real. So if you think tearing me down in front of your audience gives you credibility, go ahead. But I'm proud of my work. All of it. That line landed. Even the audience, who had been holding their breath, broke into uncertain applause. Not out of joy, but out of relief. Someone had finally drawn a boundary. Joy Behar crossed her arms, lips pressed into a thin, defiant line, as though daring him to flinch. But Sandler didn't. If anything, he seemed more grounded now, less like the easygoing comedian people were used to seeing, and more like a man who'd decided he wasn't going to laugh his way through this one. For a few seconds, the studio was silent, except for the subtle hum of live equipment. Even the audience, many of whom had come expecting jokes and charming anecdotes, now sat still, caught between discomfort and awe. This wasn't daytime television anymore. This was something else entirely. Then Joy leaned in again, her voice lowered but no less pointed. "You say you're proud of your work," she said, her tone edged with condescension. "But don't you think it's time to stop pretending that popularity equals quality? Box office hits are one thing, but critical respect, that's something you've never consistently had." Sandler's eyes didn't move from hers. "Respect looks different depending on who's giving it," he replied calmly. "I've got soldiers overseas who tell me my movies help them get through rough nights. I've had parents tell me their kids laughed during hard times. If that's not meaningful to you, fine. But I'm not going to apologize for making people happy." His words hung in the air like a quiet challenge. Whoopi Goldberg, seated nearby, shifted slightly as if she might interject. She'd been mostly silent during the exchange, clearly uncomfortable with the direction things had taken. But before she could say anything, Joy pressed on, relentless. "And what about your so-called evolution?" she asked, arms unfolding as she gestured toward him. "You're saying you've grown, but isn't it a little convenient that your shift to drama came right after years of flops? It doesn't feel like growth, it feels like panic." There it was, the accusation spoken plainly, that Sandler's foray into dramatic roles wasn't about artistic ambition, but survival. Reinvention born not from passion, but desperation. Adam took a slow breath. He wasn't rattled, at least not visibly, but there was steel in his eyes now. "You want to believe that," he said. "You want to think I'm some clown trying to cling to relevance. That's your story, but I've always done things on my own timeline. I'm not here because of bad reviews, I'm here because this story meant something to me. And if you'd actually watched the film instead of coming in with your claws out, you might have seen that." There was a murmur from the crowd, small but noticeable. A few people even clapped. Joy glanced toward the audience with mild irritation, then turned back to Adam, her voice sharper now, brittle with stubbornness. "I did watch it," she snapped, "and I saw a guy trying to act like someone else. I didn't see a transformation. I saw a performance that still felt like you were holding back, afraid to let go of the goofy safety net." That hit differently, not a critique of the movie, but of Sandler himself, his emotional capacity, his limits as a performer. Sandler didn't blink. "It's interesting," he said, "how you think you know what fear looks like in someone else. Maybe what you saw was restraint. Maybe it was a character struggling to hold it together. That's kind of the point of the film. But sure, if you prefer yelling and crying to measure what's real, I get why you missed it. It was subtle, but the shift was happening. The momentum of the conversation had turned. Joy's jabs were beginning to lose their sting. Not because they weren't harsh, but because Sandler was no longer reacting the way she expected. No defensiveness, no cracks, just a firm, deliberate presence. The more she tried to drag him into the mud, the more composed he became. Behind the scenes, producers were visibly stressed. Someone off camera gestured to the control booth, clearly debating whether to cut to commercial. But the lead producer held up a hand. No, let it play out. Whatever this was, it was TV gold, and they knew it. Then Joy changed tactics. Her voice dropped, tone less fiery, but more cutting, colder. "Let's talk about your fans then," she said. "You mention them a lot, but do you ever think about how your legacy might look 10, 20 years from now? Will people remember you for anything more than fart jokes and bad accents? Or will you just be a trivia answer? That guy who made millions acting like a man-child?" This time, the reaction was immediate. The audience groaned. Audible, unified. Some were clearly uncomfortable, others offended. One woman in the front row visibly shook her head, but Adam didn't react to the insult, not directly. Instead, he took a slow sip of water, then looked at Joy with something between pity and resolve. "You know what's funny?" he said finally. I don't think about legacy the way you do. I think about the moments. The dad who watches Big Daddy with his kid every year. The college roommates who quote Happy Gilmore while going through finals. I didn't make those movies to win awards. I made them to connect. And if that's not enough for you, fine. But it's more than enough for me. The air in the studio shifted once again. This time the applause was louder. No longer just polite, but emotional, real. People were with him now. Joy opened her mouth, but this time it was Whoopi who stepped in. "Okay," she said, her voice low but commanding. "We've heard both sides. Maybe it's time to give the man a little room to breathe, huh?" Joy looked at her, visibly frustrated, but said nothing. She leaned back in her chair, her expression unreadable. Whether she felt bested, embarrassed, or simply unsatisfied, it wasn't clear. What was clear was that she had no more ammunition, or if she did, she was saving it. Sandler, still calm, nodded respectfully to Whoopi. "Thank you," he said. The tension was still there, simmering just beneath the surface, but something had shifted. The audience, the hosts, even the energy in the room, it had all changed. The segment wasn't over, but the battle lines had been drawn and the audience was beginning to pick sides. For a few moments, silence reigned, not awkward, but charged. The kind of silence that holds more tension than a shouting match ever could. Whoopi sat still, eyes lowered but thoughtful, as if weighing the next move carefully. Joy, arms crossed again, looked out into the audience, avoiding eye contact with both Adam and the other hosts. It was clear she'd pushed the envelope, maybe further than she'd intended. And Adam Sandler, he sat composed, unmoved, like a man who had survived the fire and was now waiting for the smoke to clear. Finally, Sunny Hostin spoke up, her voice breaking the stillness. It was softer, measured. "Adam, I actually did see the film, and there's a scene where your character sits at the hospital bedside of his dying father. There's almost no dialogue, but the emotion, it's all there. That moment stayed with me. It felt incredibly human." Sandler's shoulders relaxed just slightly. He turned toward her with a nod of genuine gratitude. "Thank you," he said quietly. "That scene meant a lot to me. It was tough to shoot. There wasn't much in the script for it. Just be there. Feel it." He glanced over toward Joy, not with hostility, but with finality, as if to say, "This is what you missed." Then back to Sunny. "You ever sit with someone dying?" he asked her, not for drama, but out of honest vulnerability. That silence, that helplessness, you try to find words, but they don't come. I lost my dad in real life a few years ago. That scene wasn't acting. The crowd exhaled collectively. Suddenly, the room wasn't a studio. It felt like a confessional. That wall between celebrity and viewer, performer and audience had vanished. What remained was just a man talking about loss, memory, and the quiet moments that define a life. Sunny gave a soft nod. "I'm sorry for your loss," she said. Sandler returned the sentiment with a slight smile. "Thanks. You know, I used to think the goal was always to make people laugh. That was the win. But as I got older, I realized that silence can say more than a punchline ever could. I'm still learning, still trying to figure it out." He paused, then added with a light shrug, "But fart jokes still have their place." That broke the tension. Some in the audience laughed, a few even cheered. It was a well-timed reminder. This was still Adam Sandler, still the guy who played golf with an alligator, still the one who sang ridiculous songs in oversized sweatshirts. But he was more than that too, and now he'd proven it. Joy didn't laugh. She leaned forward again, though this time her tone had shifted, no longer sharp but skeptical. "So are you saying you're done with comedy?" Sandler considered it for a moment. "Not at all," he said. "Comedy saved my life. I wouldn't be here without it. I love it. I'll always love it, but I also want to stretch, try new things, grow. I don't want to be put in a box." Joy cocked her head. "But don't you think audiences already have you in a box? And if so, isn't it fair for critics to question whether you belong outside of it?" Sandler gave a small smile, not dismissive but firm. "Maybe, but artists don't grow in boxes. They suffocate in them." That line landed. The audience applauded, not wildly, but steadily. You could hear agreement in the rhythm of it. He wasn't grandstanding. He wasn't throwing barbs. He was simply speaking from a place of clarity, and people respected it. Joy leaned back again, folding her arms once more. This time, her expression wasn't smug. It was contemplative. For the first time in the interview, she looked like she might be listening. Meanwhile, backstage, producers were in disbelief. What was supposed to be a 10-minute press spot had now gone nearly 25, but no one was signaling to cut it short. Ratings were spiking in real time. Social media mentions were climbing by the second. This was the kind of moment television rarely captured anymore. Unscripted, raw, alive. Then Whoopi spoke again. "Adam," she said, voice steady, "you've had one of the most interesting careers in entertainment. You've done everything from sketch comedy to emotional dramas. That's not something everyone can claim. The fact that people are even debating your range, that says something." Sandler looked at her with respect. "Thanks, Whoopi. That means a lot coming from you." She nodded slowly. "But I gotta ask, you ever think about just walking away from all of it? The movies, the critics, the noise?" There was a long pause before Adam answered. "Sometimes," he admitted. "Sometimes when it gets loud enough, yeah, you think about it. But then I remember what I love about this. I love telling stories, making people feel something, whether it's a big laugh or a quiet tear. And until that stops mattering to me or to the people watching, I'll keep going." It was a simple answer, but it carried weight. Joy surprisingly said nothing. Instead, she glanced at a note card in front of her, one she hadn't used yet, and gently placed it face down on the table. No fanfare, no big statement, just an unspoken acknowledgement that maybe, just maybe, she'd misjudged him. The segment was now pushing into uncharted territory. Viewers at home were glued to their screens. Clips were already going viral. Headlines were being drafted in newsrooms across the country. It was clear this wasn't going to be just another celebrity interview. Finally, the floor manager gave a subtle signal. "Wrap it up. Time was almost out." Whoopi looked around, then back to the camera. "Well, I think we've covered a lot more ground today than any of us expected." Laughter from the crowd. "Warm this time." Sandler gave a modest nod. "Yeah, not quite the puff piece I was expecting." Joy at last cracked a smile, not wide, but genuine. "You held your own," she said quietly. "I'll give you that." Adam looked at her. "I didn't come here to fight you, Joy. I came to talk about the work." She nodded. "Fair enough." And with that, the temperature in the room finally returned to normal, or something close to it. The cameras began to pan out. Music swelled. The audience clapped, not out of relief this time, but with genuine appreciation. As the segment closed, the host leaned in to thank Adam. He shook hands, offered hugs, and exited the stage with the same grounded calm he'd carried throughout the storm. But once he was off camera, the look he gave his publicist said everything. "That was supposed to be easy," he muttered. His publicist just exhaled, then smiled. "It was better than easy," she said. "It was unforgettable. If you like this video, then subscribe."